Somewhere along the southern coastlines of the ancient world, a seabird made a decision that would take 60 million years to fully complete. It could fly. Its wings were the product of millions of years of refinement, the same extraordinary inheritance that every bird carries, the thing that sets them apart from almost everything else alive. It had the sky, and then slowly, generation by generation, it began giving it up. The wings grew shorter, the bones grew heavier, the ocean kept offering more than the air ever could. And at some point, a point that no fossil has ever precisely captured, the last penguin ancestor that could truly fly lifted off for the final time, and every penguin that has ever lived since was born into a world where the sky was already closed to them. For 60 million years, not one of them has gone back. The penguin standing on Antarctic ice today still carries the bones of a bird that once flew. Inside those flippers are the same structures that fold inside the wings of the albatross, a relative of the penguin's ancestors that still crosses entire oceans on the wind without effort. Two animals descended from the same lineage. One still owns the sky, the other traded it for something else entirely. What made that trade possible? What changed in the world and in the bird to make the ocean a better offer than the air? Tonight, we are traveling back in time to follow the story of why penguins abandoned the sky for the sea. Across the southern Pacific, during the closing chapter of the Cretaceous period, a familiar shape crossed the warm coastal winds. It belonged to a seabird whose descendants had not yet surrendered anything at all. Forests reached toward broad shorelines, fish gathered through shallow waters, and dinosaurs still dominated the land beyond the beaches. Within this setting lived an adaptable bird whose future stretched in directions no living creature could have sensed. Its body balanced two different ways of moving through the world. Broad wings carried it above rolling waves for long journeys between feeding grounds, while the same wings folded close against its sides when it slipped beneath the surface after schools of fish. Neither skill overshadowed the other. Flight offered speed across open water, and diving opened another source of food waiting below. The bird belonged comfortably to both environments, carrying no sign that one of those abilities would eventually disappear from its lineage. Modern genetic research has helped illuminate this distant ancestry with remarkable clarity. A comprehensive study published during the year 2022 compared the complete genetic material of all 20 living penguin species alongside 50 fossil species. The results confirmed that penguins share their closest living relatives with the order containing albatrosses, petrels, and shearwaters. Their family connection reaches back to a single flying ancestor that lived close to the boundary separating the Cretaceous period from the age that followed, around 66 million years ago. That ancestor probably resembled today's diving petrels more than the heavy birds standing along Antarctic shores. Its frame was streamlined for travel across long distances, while strong shoulder muscles powered short underwater pursuits after fish. The wings remained flexible enough to generate lift through air, yet sturdy enough to push against water for brief dives. Evolution had not yet demanded complete dedication to either realm. Every feature represented compromise, creating an animal capable of succeeding in two different worlds without mastering either completely. The coastlines bordering what is now New Zealand offered an ideal home. Warm currents supported abundant marine life, and productive seas provided dependable feeding opportunities throughout much of the year. Large flying predators appear to have been relatively uncommon across these southern waters, reducing the urgency of remaining constantly airborne. A bird could spend increasing amounts of time diving without facing overwhelming danger from above, allowing natural variation in underwater ability to persist across many generations. Those generations unfolded without purpose or foresight. Small differences in wing shape, muscle strength, and diving efficiency appeared through ordinary inheritance, while successful individuals passed those traits onward. Each adjustment remained modest, almost impossible to notice within a single lifetime. Across immense stretches of time, however, those tiny changes accumulated into possibilities that earlier ancestors had never explored. The bird itself experienced only another ordinary day above the Southern Ocean. It hunted, rested, nested, and returned again to the sea, carrying within its body the inherited blueprint that would eventually give rise to one of Earth's most distinctive birds. Far beyond the horizon, a wandering object traveled through space on a path that would transform oceans, coastlines, and the future of this unassuming seabird lineage forever. Far beyond the reach of winds or waves, a wandering fragment of rock had been following its path through space for ages beyond imagination. Around 66.043 million years ago, that journey ended when an object measuring between 10 kilometers, which is about 6.2 miles, and 15 kilometers, that is nearly 9.3 miles, across struck the Yucatan Peninsula at roughly 20 kilometers per second. The collision released energy equivalent to about 100 teratones of trinitrotoluene explosive, exceeding the power of every weapon humanity has ever constructed by an almost incomprehensible margin. Within days, the planet entered a transformed state. Dust, vaporized rock, and soot spread through the atmosphere until sunlight faded across much of the world. Plants and microscopic algae depended upon light to build the foundation of nearly every food web. As that foundation weakened, life higher in the chain faced growing scarcity. Marine ecosystems began to unravel first, followed closely by communities across the continents, each depending upon the productivity that had almost disappeared. The oceans changed with unusual speed. For more than 100 million years, enormous marine reptiles had occupied nearly every major hunting role. Mosasaurs pursued prey through coastal waters and the open sea, with some individuals stretching to about 17 meters, which is about 56 feet. Plesiosaurs traveled through oceans across the globe, with body designs refined over immense spans of evolutionary history. Ammonites, whose spiral shells had drifted through changing seas for roughly 350 million years, vanished alongside them. Entire branches of life ended within a geological moment. Across the southern Pacific, one lineage endured. The adaptable flying seabird introduced earlier remained small enough, flexible enough, and varied enough in its habits to survive conditions that overwhelmed many specialized creatures. It already searched for food along coastlines and beneath the water's surface, carrying abilities that fit a changing shoreline more comfortably than those of animals bound to vanished ecosystems. As the great marine reptiles disappeared, their absence reshaped the sea itself. Hunting territories, once defended by giant predators, no longer belonged to anyone. Productive shallows, offshore feeding grounds, and deeper waters offered opportunities that had remained inaccessible for countless generations. Ecologists describe this transformation as ecological release, a period when the disappearance of dominant competitors allows surviving lineages to diversify into newly available ways of life with unusual speed. Natural selection responded to those openings through countless ordinary generations. Individuals capable of pursuing prey farther from shore or remaining underwater a little longer gained subtle advantages. Their descendants inherited those traits, while additional variations accumulated through time. The changes remained gradual within each generation, although the broader pattern unfolded with exceptional speed by evolutionary standards. The fossil record later preserved evidence of this expansion. Bird lineages connected to the future penguins diversified rapidly after the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, exploring forms and behaviors that had scarcely existed before. The sea had become a place where opportunity reached farther than danger for creatures prepared to enter it. A flying seabird that once divided its life between air and water now found increasing reward below the surface, where an altered world offered room for an entirely new history to unfold. Stone has a way of preserving moments that every living witness has long since forgotten. Among layers of pale marine sediment beside the Waipara River in what is now New Zealand, one such moment remained undisturbed until the year 1980. An amateur geologist named Al Mannering uncovered part of a skeleton unlike any recognized before. Only 9 bones emerged from the surrounding rock, yet they belonged to the oldest penguin ever discovered, a species later named Waimanu mannaringi. The fossil now rests in the Canterbury Museum in Christchurch, while the surrounding rock reveals an age of about 61.6 million years. From the perspective of geological history, only 4 to 5 million years had passed since the Great Extinction reshaped life across Earth. Many animal groups require spans just as long to adjust to a modest dietary shift. This lineage had already transformed into something committed almost entirely to the sea. Its name carries that commitment within it. Waimanu combines two Maori words, one meaning water and the other meaning bird. Together, they describe an animal whose existence centered on the ocean in a way its airborne ancestors never experienced. The name also reflects a transition preserved in bone, marking a stage where familiar avian features remained visible while new adaptations steadily emerged. Standing around 1 meter tall, which is about 3 feet, Waimanu matched the height of a modern emperor penguin. Its appearance, however, differed in several important ways. The legs were longer and placed farther toward the rear of the body, creating a posture suited for movement through water instead of graceful travel across land. A long, slender beak projected forward, recalling the shape seen in modern herons. Inside the wings, the bones had already become shorter and denser than those of flying seabirds, although they had not yet formed the stiff flippers carried by living penguins. Swimming style reflected this intermediate anatomy. Waimanu probably moved through coastal waters, using broad strokes that resembled the motion of modern loons more than the efficient underwater flight performed by present-day penguins. Its wings acted partly as paddles, producing forward motion without the rigid hydrofoil structure that later species would perfect through millions of additional years of natural selection. Every movement carried echoes of an earlier ancestry while introducing capabilities that belonged to an entirely different future. The Waipara site offered another valuable surprise. Researchers identified leg bones from a second penguin species preserved within the same deposits. That unidentified bird appears to have reached proportions comparable to Anthropornis, one of the largest penguins known from the fossil record. Such diversity appearing within rocks of the same age suggests the lineage had already branched into multiple forms before these fossils were buried, leaving earlier chapters still concealed beneath older sediments that have either not survived or remain undiscovered. For all its importance, Waimanu does not represent the opening page of penguin history. It appears after countless generations had already shaped bodies for life in the sea. The oldest known fossil, therefore, captures a lineage already well established, offering a glimpse of transformation in progress instead of its first beginning. The path from flying seabird to ocean specialist had advanced farther than stone alone first seemed to reveal. Every transformation has a boundary where two different paths can no longer remain together. For the ancestors of penguins, that boundary emerged within the structure of the wing itself. Evolution could refine it for soaring through air or for driving through water, yet every improvement for one purpose reduced its performance in the other. The same bones, muscles, feathers, and joints could not reach perfection in both environments at once. Air yields easily beneath a wing. To remain aloft, a bird depends on broad surfaces that generate lift while carrying as little weight as possible. Hollow bones lighten the skeleton, flexible feathers adjust to shifting currents, and long wings spread force across the atmosphere with remarkable efficiency. Every detail favors endurance, allowing some seabirds to remain above the ocean for days with scarcely a pause. Water demands the opposite arrangement. It presses against every movement with far greater resistance than air. A wing entering that medium performs best when it is compact, rigid, and powerful. Dense bones reduce buoyancy, shortening the effort needed to descend. Stiff feathers preserve the shape of the wing under pressure, while a smaller surface slices through water with greater control. Features that create elegant flight become obstacles once submerged, increasing drag and wasting precious energy. These competing demands leave little room for compromise. A bird attempting to excel in both settings must carry equipment that interferes with itself. Wings enlarged for efficient flight become cumbersome underwater, while wings refined for diving struggle to keep a bird airborne. Evolution, therefore, encounters a physical limit where every additional improvement in one direction carries an unavoidable cost in the other. Evidence for that limit appears among living birds that still balance both abilities. During the year 2013, researchers published an investigation in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences examining common murres, seabirds that fly through the air and pursue prey beneath the surface using their wings. Their measurements revealed that murres expend more energy during flight than any other bird studied. Remaining airborne is extraordinarily demanding because their wings have already shifted partway toward underwater propulsion. The researchers described this condition as an evolutionary tipping point. Before reaching that threshold, modest adjustments can improve diving while preserving practical flight. Beyond it, each further adaptation increases the energetic burden of staying in the air until flying no longer provides enough benefit to justify its cost. Natural selection does not preserve expensive structures that no longer improve survival or reproduction. Across many generations, unused capabilities gradually diminish as other traits continue to strengthen. The penguin lineage crossed that threshold completely. Shorter wings captured less lift, but produced stronger strokes beneath the surface. Denser bones reduced the struggle against buoyancy while making takeoff increasingly difficult. Feather structure and joint mobility shifted toward underwater efficiency, leaving fewer characteristics suited for sustained flight. None of these changes appeared in isolation. Each reinforced the next, guiding the lineage farther from the sky with every generation. This irreversible direction also reflects a broader evolutionary principle known as Dallow's law. Once a complex biological system disappears through countless accumulated changes, rebuilding every interacting part becomes extraordinarily unlikely. During roughly 60 million years of penguin evolution, no known species has regained true flight. The wing remained, though its purpose changed completely, carrying the memory of the sky while becoming an instrument designed for the sea. A skeleton can reveal the place an animal truly belongs. Long before feathers or muscles leave their mark in the fossil record, Bone preserves the story of movement with remarkable honesty. The earliest birds inherited frames shaped for the open air, carrying lightweight architecture that made sustained flight possible. Penguins followed another path, and the evidence of that journey became written into every part of their skeleton. Most flying birds possess a condition called pneumatization. Air sacs connected to the respiratory system extend into many of the bones, creating hollow internal spaces that remove unnecessary weight while maintaining strength. This arrangement allows wings to lift the body with far less effort, conserving energy during long migrations and repeated takeoffs. Every gram removed from the skeleton contributes to efficient flight, making lightness one of the defining characteristics of birds that spend much of their lives above the ground. The penguin skeleton gradually abandoned that design. As generations became increasingly dependent upon diving, the hollow spaces inside many bones filled with dense cortical tissue. Scientists describe this condition as osteosclerosis. Instead of reducing weight, the skeleton accumulated it, producing bones that rank among the heaviest of any bird when compared with body size. The transformation unfolded across millions of years, each generation carrying a slightly denser frame than those before it. Measurements from emperor penguin wing bones illustrate how complete that change became. Their compactness reaches approximately 0.92 on a scale running from 0 to 1, where 1 represents completely solid bone. No flying bird approaches such density. The difference is not an accidental consequence of evolution. It reflects a body reshaped to solve the physical demands imposed by the ocean. Buoyancy constantly acts upon every air-breathing diver. A body filled with air naturally rises toward the surface, requiring continuous effort to descend. Each meter, which is about 3 feet, traveled downward demands energy devoted to overcoming that upward force. A denser skeleton changes the balance. Additional weight shifts the penguin toward neutral or slightly negative buoyancy, allowing gravity to assist the descent instead of opposing it. Less energy is spent, reaching hunting depth, leaving greater reserves available for swimming, searching, and returning to the surface. Pressure introduces another challenge. Emperor penguins regularly descend beyond 500 meters, which is about 1,640 feet. At those depths, surrounding pressure reaches roughly 51 times that experienced at sea level. Hollow cavities inside bones would experience immense compression under such conditions, creating structural weaknesses that no deep diving specialist could tolerate. Dense bone avoids that vulnerability because there is no large air-filled chamber available to collapse. Strength comes from solid construction instead of empty space. The fossil record preserves this transition with unusual clarity. Early penguin species display intermediate bone density, neither fully hollow nor fully solid. Later forms reveal progressively thicker internal walls as the lineage explored greater depths and relied more completely upon underwater hunting. Evolution did not replace one skeleton overnight. It adjusted the existing framework through countless small modifications that accumulated into a completely different engineering solution. The contrast becomes unmistakable when comparable skeletons are handled side by side. A container filled with penguin bones weighs noticeably more than one holding the bones of a flying bird of similar size. Before anatomy is studied or measurements are taken, the hands already recognize that the ocean reshaped this bird from the inside outward, giving weight where the sky once demanded lightness. Evolution did not immediately shape penguins into the compact birds familiar today. For tens of millions of years after the earliest members of their lineage entered the sea, another pattern unfolded. Bodies became larger, heavier, and taller as though the oceans themselves rewarded increasing size. During this long chapter, some penguins reached dimensions unmatched by any species living now, becoming dominant hunters across coastlines that looked very different from the modern world. Among the greatest was Anthropornis nordenskjoldi, a species that lived between about 45 and 33 million years ago along the shores of what are now Antarctica and New Zealand. Standing close to 1.8 meters tall, which is about 5 feet 11 inches, it weighed roughly 90 kilograms, which is about 198 pounds. Some of the largest known individuals may have approached 108 kilograms, which is about 238 pounds. Compared with the emperor penguin, this bird possessed an imposing frame capable of pursuing prey with powerful underwater strokes. Another remarkable giant, Paleudiptus klekowski, may have grown even larger. Estimates suggest a body length approaching 2 meters, which is about 6 feet 7 inches, with a mass around 116 kilograms, which is about 256 pounds. Such proportions placed it among the largest birds ever adapted for underwater flight. Its enormous body reflected a marine environment where abundant food and limited competition favored size instead of restraint. The story became even more surprising when researchers described Icodiptes salasi after fossils discovered in Peru during the year 2007. This species lived about 36 million years ago near the equator, far from icy coastlines. It carried a long spear-shaped beak, measuring about 20 centimeters, which is about 8 inches, suited for capturing prey different from those pursued by modern penguins. The discovery transformed scientific understanding because it demonstrated that giant penguins flourished in warm tropical seas long before anyone expected. Earlier interpretations suggested penguins reached warm climates only around 10 million years ago. Icodiptis extended that history backward by roughly 30 million years. The world surrounding these birds belonged to the Eocene epoch, when global climates remained much warmer than those of the present. Permanent ice had not yet formed across Antarctica. Forests reached almost to the shoreline, creating landscapes that would appear unfamiliar beside today's frozen continent. Rich coastal waters supported plentiful fish, allowing large marine hunters to thrive without depending upon polar conditions. Their extraordinary size reflected opportunities created after the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction. Giant marine reptiles had disappeared, leaving ecological roles without occupants. Penguins expanded into portions of that vacant marine world, evolving body plans capable of pursuing larger prey and traveling efficiently through productive coastal seas. They became leading predators within habitats that offered little competition from other diving birds. These creatures bore little resemblance to the popular image of penguins gathered upon sea ice. Long beaks, towering bodies, and commanding presence defined them. They hunted through warm oceans with confidence earned across millions of years of successful adaptation. Their fossils preserve an era when the penguin family explored possibilities far beyond those represented by the species living today, revealing that the history of these birds once stretched through tropical waters as comfortably as it now extends across the southern seas. No kingdom in nature remains unchanged forever. The great penguins that had flourished across productive southern seas occupied their place for millions of years, yet the ocean around them continued evolving. While their bodies reflected remarkable success, new lineages were beginning to reshape marine ecosystems in ways that favored different abilities. The waters that had once rewarded immense size gradually became places where speed, agility, and rapid maneuvering determined survival. For roughly 30 million years, the southern oceans contained few large marine mammals capable of challenging giant penguins. Seals, sea lions, and toothed whales had either not reached these waters or remained uncommon enough that they exerted little influence over established food webs. Large penguins hunted with comparatively little interference, filling ecological roles that had remained available since the disappearance of the great marine reptiles. Their dominance reflected a balance that had endured across many generations. That balance shifted during the middle part of the Eocene epoch and continued changing through the Oligocene epoch, spanning roughly 34 to 23 million years ago. Mammals that had once lived entirely upon land entered the sea and diversified with striking speed. Early relatives of seals and sea lions developed streamlined bodies, powerful flippers, and insulating layers that allowed prolonged hunting in cold water. At nearly the same time, toothed whales spread through oceans around the globe, introducing highly capable predators into marine communities that had not experienced such hunters for millions of years. Unlike the reptiles that vanished after the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, these mammals possessed warm blood, rapid swimming ability, and impressive endurance. Many pursued prey through sustained chases instead of relying upon sudden ambushes. They could dive deeply, accelerate quickly, and follow agile targets through changing underwater landscapes. Every improvement increased competitive pressure upon the large penguins that had previously occupied these feeding grounds with relatively little opposition. A giant penguin standing around 1.8 meters tall, which is about 5 feet 11 inches, and weighing close to 90 kilograms, which is about 198 pounds, remained an accomplished diver. Size offered strength and stability beneath the surface, yet it also carried disadvantages. Large bodies required more energy to accelerate, changed direction less readily, and presented a conspicuous target while resting or entering the water. Characteristics that had supported dominance within an open ecological landscape gradually became liabilities as pursuit predators multiplied. The fossil record mirrors this transition with notable consistency. Declines in giant penguin diversity correspond closely with the expansion of seals and early toothed whales throughout southern oceans. Although no single event erased these birds, the timing suggests that increasing competition and predation steadily reduced the advantages enjoyed by oversized body plans. Evolution responded in the same gradual manner that had shaped penguins from the beginning, favoring descendants whose proportions allowed quicker movement and more efficient escape. Across succeeding generations, smaller forms became increasingly common. Compact bodies accelerated more readily through water, turned with greater precision, and demanded fewer resources to sustain. These descendants retained exceptional diving ability while gaining flexibility that proved valuable within increasingly crowded ecosystems. Natural selection refined balance instead of sheer scale. The immense hunters of the Eocene epoch eventually disappeared, leaving their bones preserved in rock while their descendants continued adapting. Modern penguins inherit the legacy of those giants without inheriting their enormous size, carrying forward a body shaped for an ocean transformed by new predators, new competitors, and a marine world that no longer rewarded grandeur alone. At first glance, a penguin appears to swim with its wings. A closer look reveals something far more surprising. The movement unfolding beneath the surface is not a new form of locomotion created from nothing. It follows the same mechanical principles that once carried its ancestors across the sky. The medium changed, yet the motion remained recognizably that of a flying bird. Each stroke traces a familiar pattern. The flipper sweeps downward, then backward, rises again, and returns forward before beginning the next cycle. Flying birds repeat this sequence with every wing beat through air. Penguins repeat it through water. Lift is still generated by the shape of the wing moving through a fluid, following the same physical principles that also allow aircraft to remain aloft. Only the surrounding substance has changed, replacing air with the far denser ocean. That difference transforms the outcome. Water is approximately 800 times denser than air. A wing producing modest lift in flight suddenly encounters a medium capable of supporting far greater force. Every stroke pushes against far more material, creating powerful forward thrust with comparatively compact movements. The ancestral wing did not lose its ability to fly. It entered a world where flight itself became vastly more effective. The flipper reflects that transformation in every bone. The humerus, radius, and ulna remain arranged in the same order inherited from flying birds, yet each has become shorter, broader, and flatter through millions of years of gradual modification. Their joints permit very little independent movement, creating a rigid structure that behaves as a single blade passing through water. Researchers studying hydrodynamics have found that this profile approaches an efficient shape for underwater propulsion, remarkably close to forms produced through modern engineering. Unlike swimmers that rely upon their feet, penguins generate useful thrust throughout the entire stroke cycle. Downward movement drives the body ahead, while the returning upward stroke continues producing forward force instead of merely resetting the limb. Motion remains continuous, with little interruption between one beat and the next. Every movement contributes to progress through the water, preserving momentum with exceptional efficiency. Rigidity plays an essential role in that performance. Flexible wings perform well in the atmosphere because they adapt constantly to changing air currents. Water responds differently. Excessive bending wastes energy and creates turbulence that reduces propulsion. Penguin flippers therefore resist deformation, channeling muscular force directly into the surrounding water with minimal loss. The entire limb behaves as one integrated surface, maintaining its shape through every powerful sweep. The muscles driving those strokes also reveal a remarkable continuity. The large breast muscles that once powered flight never disappeared from the penguin body. They remain anchored to the pronounced keel of the breastbone, contracting with extraordinary strength to move the flippers. Their purpose changed, while their anatomical foundation endured across the transition from sky to sea. Evolution redirected an existing system instead of constructing an entirely different one. Nothing within this remarkable mechanism appeared all at once. Every feature grew from structures inherited through distant ancestry, refined generation after generation until flight itself found a different expression. The sky left its imprint upon the penguin forever, preserved within wings that still fly, although the journey now unfolds through water instead of air. Every dive begins with a reserve that cannot be replenished until the bird returns to the surface. Breath is taken only once, and from that instant onward, every movement depends upon a carefully managed supply of oxygen. Depth increases the challenge with every passing moment, since muscles continue demanding energy while fresh air remains far above. The success of a penguin, therefore, depends as much upon its blood as upon its flippers, its bones, or its streamlined body. The first stage of that remarkable system unfolds inside the lungs. Hemoglobin, the protein carried within red blood cells, gathers oxygen before the descent begins. In penguins, the molecular structure of this protein has been refined through evolution, so it captures oxygen efficiently during each breath at the surface. That achievement alone would offer only part of the solution. Oxygen must also be delivered exactly where it is needed, while the body works under increasing pressure far below the waves. As muscles continue contracting through powerful strokes, their chemistry changes. Exercise produces increasing acidity within surrounding tissues. Penguin hemoglobin responds with exceptional sensitivity through a process known as the enhanced Bohr effect. As acidity rises, oxygen is released more readily from the blood into working muscles. Compared with close flying relatives, this response is greatly amplified, allowing oxygen to leave the bloodstream with remarkable precision under the chemical conditions created during a demanding dive. The result is an elegant pattern of conservation, followed by timely delivery. Oxygen is gathered in the greatest possible quantity before submergence, transported efficiently through the circulation, then released where muscular demand becomes greatest. Very little is wasted, supplying tissues whose immediate needs remain modest. Instead, the body continually shifts its limited reserves toward the organs performing the hardest work, extending the usefulness of every breath drawn before entering the sea. Another reserve waits within the muscles themselves. Myoglobin, a protein closely related to hemoglobin, stores oxygen directly inside muscle fibers. Penguins possess extraordinarily high concentrations of this molecule, giving their flesh a deep red color that can appear almost purple. That striking appearance reflects an enormous internal store of oxygen held within the muscles, ready to sustain movement after the oxygen carried by circulating blood begins to diminish. This muscular reserve becomes increasingly valuable during the deepest phases of a dive. As available oxygen declines, the circulatory system reduces blood flow to tissues that can briefly tolerate lower supplies, preserving circulation for the brain and other essential organs. Working muscles continue drawing upon their stores of myoglobin, allowing steady propulsion while the remaining blood oxygen is carefully rationed. Several complementary adaptations operate together, each supporting the others without interruption. Measurements from emperor penguins reveal how extraordinary this system has become. During prolonged dives, arterial blood oxygen concentrations fall to levels that would produce loss of consciousness in humans and would be considered medically critical in most other warm-blooded animals. Penguins continue functioning with little sign of impairment, their bodies relying upon millions of years of physiological refinement rather than any single adaptation. No individual change explains this endurance by itself. Efficient hemoglobin loading, enhanced oxygen release through the Bohr effect, immense myoglobin reserves, and carefully regulated circulation operate as one integrated network. Evolution assembled these features gradually across immense spans of time, transforming every breath into a resource that could sustain life through long passages beneath the ocean surface. A journey toward the darkest reaches of the sea begins with a heartbeat that seems entirely ordinary. An emperor penguin resting upon the ice maintains a rhythm of about 72 beats each minute, almost identical to that of a relaxed human. Nothing in that steady pulse hints at the transformation waiting once the bird slips beneath the surface. Within minutes, one of the most remarkable cardiovascular performances in the animal kingdom unfolds. Field researchers have attached miniature electrocardiogram recorders to free diving emperor penguins, allowing the heart to be monitored throughout complete hunting dives. Those recordings revealed a change so dramatic that it challenged earlier expectations. At the deepest stage of a prolonged descent, The heart rate may fall to only 10 beats each minute. This is not the result of exhaustion or failure. Every beat is carefully controlled, each pause extending the limited oxygen reserve carried from the surface. This response is known as bradycardia, a deliberate slowing of the heart directed by the nervous system. As the rhythm declines, blood flow is redirected with extraordinary precision. Organs that can tolerate reduced circulation temporarily receive much less blood, while the brain and the heart itself continue receiving the oxygen required to remain fully functional. Every contraction serves a smaller network than before, preserving precious reserves for the tissues that cannot endure interruption. The flippers continue driving the bird through the water despite this reduction in circulation. They accomplish this because the muscles are no longer depending primarily upon fresh oxygen arriving through the bloodstream. Instead, they consume the abundant myoglobin stored within the muscle fibers themselves. Earlier adaptations in blood chemistry and muscle structure now operate together, allowing movement to continue even while circulation to the limbs has been greatly reduced. The body functions as an integrated system whose components support one another with remarkable efficiency. The return journey reverses the process with equal precision. As the penguin ascends, the heart gradually increases its pace. Blood once again reaches tissues that had briefly accepted reduced circulation, carrying fresh oxygen collected moments later at the surface. The complete cycle, from approximately 72 beats each minute to as few as 10, then back again, unfolds during a single dive without disrupting the bird's coordination or hunting ability. Millions of years of natural selection shaped this rhythm into an elegant solution for surviving prolonged submersion. The greatest dives recorded for emperor penguins exceed 535 meters, which is about 1,756 feet, while lasting more than 27 minutes. Their descent is assisted by the dense skeleton that evolution assembled over countless generations. Negative buoyancy allows the body to sink with minimal effort instead of resisting its own tendency to float. Energy conserved during the downward journey becomes available for pursuing prey in the depths and for the demanding ascent toward open air. King penguins follow a different pattern, though one built upon many of the same physiological foundations. They commonly descend to 300 meters, which is about 984 feet, targeting the deep scattering layer, a living band of fish and other marine creatures that shifts through the water column between daylight and darkness. Their timing matches these daily migrations with remarkable consistency. Every heartbeat, every stored breath, and every powerful stroke reflects an ancient partnership between circulation, muscle, and the changing rhythms of the sea. Light changes its behavior the instant it crosses the boundary between air and water. A ray that travels cleanly through the open atmosphere bends differently once it enters the sea, altering the way every object appears. Human vision depends heavily upon the cornea to perform the first stage of focusing, which is why an open eye underwater immediately loses clarity. The familiar world dissolves into soft outlines because the optical design of the human eye was never intended for two different environments. Penguins inherited the same basic vertebrate eye, yet millions of years beneath the waves reshaped its operation into something remarkably versatile. Instead of relying primarily upon the cornea, their visual system transfers most of the focusing responsibility to another structure deeper within the eye. This arrangement allows sharp vision, whether the bird is standing beneath an open sky or pursuing prey through cold seawater. The transition between those settings happens repeatedly every day, often within only a few moments. The cornea itself reveals the first major adaptation. In most land animals and flying birds, its curved surface performs much of the eye's refractive work. Water almost completely cancels that contribution because its optical density is similar to that of the cornea. Penguins solve this problem with an unusually flat cornea whose refractive influence remains intentionally modest. Since the eye depends less upon this outer surface, vision remains effective after crossing from one medium into the other without suffering the dramatic loss of focus experienced by humans. The lens assumes the role that the cornea surrendered. It is exceptionally strong and remarkably flexible, capable of changing shape through a wide range as the penguin moves between air and water. Muscles surrounding the lens adjust its curvature with precision, restoring sharp focus despite the changing physics of light. Every dive, therefore, becomes an optical transition as well as a physical one, with the eye recalibrating itself almost immediately while the bird continues searching for prey. Color perception has also followed the demands of the ocean. Penguins possess three primary color channels, making them trichromatic, like many other birds. Their sensitivity, however, favors violet, blue, and green wavelengths, the colors that travel deepest through seawater. Red light disappears rapidly within only a few meters, which is about 10 feet, of the surface, leaving little evolutionary value in maintaining strong sensitivity to that portion of the spectrum. Their visual world has been tuned to the colors that remain available during the hunt. Some species extend perception even farther. Gentoo penguins possess sensitivity reaching into the ultraviolet portion of the spectrum, revealing wavelengths invisible to human eyes. Fish scales often reflect ultraviolet light in distinctive ways, and certain marine organisms produce patterns that become more apparent under those wavelengths. Although researchers continue investigating the full significance of this ability, ultraviolet vision may improve prey detection in conditions where ordinary visible light offers limited contrast. Species that regularly pursue prey at greater depths display another pattern of specialization. Their pupils are proportionally larger, gathering as much available light as possible before it reaches the retina. Within that retina, rod photoreceptors become increasingly abundant, while color processing cone cells occupy a smaller share of the visual landscape. This exchange favors brightness over color discrimination, matching the dim conditions of the mesopelagic zone where sunlight fades into blue shadows. Every structural adjustment, from the flattened cornea to the enlarged pupil, reflects an eye patiently rebuilt to serve two worlds with equal confidence. At first glance, the colors seem almost ceremonial, as though nature dressed penguins in formal clothing for no purpose beyond appearance. The pattern has inspired countless illustrations and stories, yet every feather tells a far more practical tale. Black across the back, white across the belly, each shade occupies its place through millions of years of selection, shaped by the demands of hunting and survival in open water, where concealment often determines whether the next dive ends with a meal or with escape. The principle behind this arrangement is known as countershading, and it depends entirely upon the way sunlight travels through the sea. Looking downward from the surface, the water darkens rapidly with increasing depth, creating a background against which a dark back becomes difficult to distinguish. Looking upward produces the opposite effect. Sunlight filtering through the upper layers forms a bright ceiling, causing a pale underside to blend into the glow above. The same body, therefore, presents two different disguises at the same moment, each matched to the direction from which another animal is viewing it. A leopard seal, searching from below, encounters little contrast between a penguin's white belly and the illuminated surface overhead. The hunter sees brightness, where the bird would otherwise cast a recognizable silhouette. At the very same time, fish occupying deeper water struggle to detect the dark upper surface of the approaching penguin because it merges with the dim water above them. Predator and prey experience opposite illusions created by the same arrangement of feathers, allowing the hunter to remain difficult to detect from either direction during the approach. This pattern offers little concealment once the bird leaves the sea. Against pale ice, weathered stone, or crowded nesting colonies, penguins stand out with surprising clarity. That apparent disadvantage carries little consequence because the greatest dangers throughout most of their evolutionary history waited in the water instead of on land. The shoreline functions primarily as a breeding refuge, while the ocean remains the place where camouflage delivers its greatest value. Natural selection, therefore, favored success beneath the surface, even if that choice reduced concealment after returning ashore. The sharp boundary separating black from white may also carry information visible to other penguins. Dense breeding colonies contain thousands of nearly identical individuals gathered shoulder to shoulder. Distinct markings can assist with recognizing members of the same species, locating returning mates, and identifying familiar neighbors during the breeding season. The exact contribution of these markings continues to be investigated, although their crisp contrast suggests that communication became another useful consequence of a pattern originally refined for survival at sea. Color also changes the physical properties of the feathers themselves. The black dorsal plumage contains elevated concentrations of melanin, the same pigment responsible for many dark colors throughout the animal kingdom. Melanin strengthens feather structure by reinforcing microscopic components within each filament, making the plumage more resistant to abrasion. Penguins repeatedly strike the ocean at considerable speed and force their way through dense water every day. Stronger feathers withstand that mechanical stress far better than weaker ones, giving dark coloration an advantage, extending beyond camouflage alone. Evidence preserved inside fossils reveals that this familiar appearance emerged surprisingly late. A remarkable specimen of the giant penguin Inkayaku paracasensis retained microscopic pigment structures known as melanosomes, allowing researchers to reconstruct aspects of its original coloration. Those fossilized feathers indicate reddish-brown and gray plumage instead of the striking black and white pattern carried by living species. The modern tuxedo therefore belongs to a newer chapter of penguin evolution, refined after the age of the giants had already passed, when changing oceans rewarded an even more specialized hunter. A feather usually brings to mind something light enough to drift on the wind. Penguin feathers abandoned that purpose long ago. They remain feathers by ancestry, yet their appearance and function have changed so completely that the body resembles finely crafted waterproof fabric wrapped around muscle and bone. Each feather is short, stiff, and shaped more like a small overlapping scale than the broad veins carried by birds that still depend upon the air. That transformation extends across the entire surface of the body. Most flying birds grow feathers in organized tracts separated by areas of exposed skin, reducing weight while leaving room for movement. Penguins follow another design altogether. Feathers emerge with remarkable uniformity from nearly every part of the skin, producing an uninterrupted covering without bare gaps. The result is an exterior that behaves as one continuous protective layer instead of a collection of separate patches. Water flowing over the body encounters a remarkably even surface, helping preserve both insulation and streamlined movement. The density of this covering is equally unusual. Emperor penguins carry approximately 9 feathers within every square centimeter of skin, creating an exceptionally compact coat. Each feather overlaps its neighbors so closely that the outer surface sheds water while preserving a thin layer of trapped air beside the skin. That slender cushion serves as another barrier against the surrounding sea. Even after repeated dives, the carefully arranged plumage continues performing both tasks together, resisting water while holding warmth close to the body. Protection comes from several layers working at once. The outer feathers lock together into a durable waterproof shield. Beneath them rests a softer layer that stores insulating air. Below both lies a substantial layer of fat beneath the skin, adding another defense against heat loss. These systems support one another continuously. Emperor penguins maintain a body temperature of approximately 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit while swimming through seawater near minus 1.8 degrees Celsius or 29 degrees Fahrenheit. The difference remains close to 40 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit, despite water carrying heat away far more efficiently than air. Maintaining that protective covering demands constant attention. Preening serves a purpose far beyond appearance. A gland near the base of the tail produces oil that each penguin carefully spreads across every feather. The coating preserves the integrity of the waterproof outer layer and prevents excessive water from reaching the insulating layers below. Failure to maintain that barrier would allow rapid heat loss during repeated immersion in the Antarctic Ocean, eventually leading to fatal hypothermia despite all the other adaptations carried within the body. The annual replacement of feathers is among the most demanding periods in a penguin's life. Instead of shedding gradually, penguins undergo a catastrophic molt during which every feather is replaced within roughly 2 to 3 weeks. Throughout that interval, the waterproof covering disappears, preventing any return to the sea for hunting. Stored fat becomes the only energy source until the new plumage has fully developed. Body mass may decline by as much as 45% before feeding can begin again. Just before plunging beneath the surface, another remarkable feature appears. Penguins deliberately release tiny pockets of trapped air from their feathers as they enter the water. Escaping bubbles reduce buoyancy while forming a shimmering layer around the body that decreases resistance as the bird accelerates. For a brief moment, the surrounding water offers less opposition, allowing swimming speed to increase dramatically during the opening phase of the dive. The plumage that once belonged to a flying ancestor has become an engineering masterpiece shaped entirely for the sea. The line separating sea from sky appears almost weightless, little more than a shimmering surface where light changes direction. For a penguin in motion, that boundary becomes a resource used with remarkable precision. Crossing it for even a fraction of a second changes the forces acting upon the body so completely that a journey requiring great effort through water briefly becomes far less demanding before the bird slips beneath the surface once more. Water is approximately 800 times denser than air, and every increase in swimming speed brings a steep increase in resistance. Pushing through that medium requires substantial muscular power because drag rises rapidly as velocity increases. Penguins meet this challenge with bodies refined to reduce turbulence, yet even their streamlined form cannot escape the basic rules governing fluid motion. At sufficient speed, remaining underwater continuously becomes increasingly expensive in energetic terms, encouraging a solution that depends upon using both environments instead of only one. Many species answer that challenge through a behavior known as porpoising. The bird bursts upward, breaks through the surface, follows a low graceful arc through the air, then slips back beneath the waves before repeating the sequence. Each leap lasts only moments, though the effect is significant. While traveling through air, resistance falls dramatically compared with water, allowing momentum to carry the body forward with much less effort. During every emergence, the penguin also takes a rapid breath, eliminating the need to interrupt its progress for separate breathing pauses. Among living species, the Gentoo penguin demonstrates this technique with exceptional efficiency. It reaches underwater speeds approaching 36 kilometers per hour, which is about 22 miles per hour, making it the fastest swimming bird known today. Repeated porpoising helps sustain those remarkable speeds across considerable distances while limiting energy expenditure. The movement appears rhythmic from above, although each leap reflects an exact balance between acceleration, momentum, drag, and respiration working together within a single, uninterrupted pattern. Adelie penguins display another expression of the same physical principles. They can sprint through the water at roughly 30 to 40 kilometers per hour, which is about 19 to 25 miles per hour. That acceleration provides enough momentum to launch the body approximately 3 meters, that is nearly 10 feet, upward onto floating sea ice. The leap lasts only an instant, yet it represents an impressive transfer of muscular force into forward velocity, allowing the penguin to rise from the sea without climbing or slowing at the edge. Porpoising also changes the geometry of pursuit. A leopard seal tracking prey near the surface must continually adjust its movements as the penguin alternates between water and air. Every leap briefly removes the target from the medium through which the predator moves most effectively. Repeated transitions complicate interception because the seal cannot maintain a perfectly continuous pursuit across two different environments. The penguin transforms the boundary itself into part of its defensive strategy, using physics as effectively as speed. Not every species follows this approach. Emperor penguins rarely porpoise because their bodies are shaped for another purpose. Greater mass, denser bones, and extraordinary diving specialization favor prolonged vertical journeys instead of rapid travel across the surface. For them, efficiency lies in descending hundreds of meters, that is nearly hundreds of feet converted into depth already measured by the sea, then returning with measured control. Across the penguin family, each form reflects a different solution, yet all remain connected by the same ancestral ability to move confidently between two worlds. Among every living penguin, one species carries the story of transformation farther than any other. The emperor penguin stands about 1.2 meters tall, which is about 3.9 feet, and may weigh as much as 45 kilograms. Its body no longer hints at a bird that once depended upon open air. Every major system, from its skeleton to its circulation, reflects millions of years spent answering the demands of the sea instead of the sky, carrying the inherited design of its ancestors to an extraordinary conclusion. Its greatest journeys unfold almost entirely out of sight. A confirmed dive reaches 535 meters, which is about 1,755 feet, on a single breath gathered before slipping beneath the surface. At that depth, the surrounding water presses with approximately 54 atmospheres of pressure, more than 50 times greater than at sea level. Such conditions would overwhelm nearly every other air-breathing vertebrate within moments. For the emperor penguin, this environment has become part of its ordinary search for food, visited again and again through a lifetime. Success at such depths depends upon every adaptation working in concert. As the descent continues, the heartbeat slows until it may reach only 10 beats each minute. Blood flow to less essential tissues becomes sharply restricted, preserving precious oxygen for the brain and the heart. The working muscles continue through another reserve already stored within their fibers, drawing upon concentrated myoglobin while circulation remains limited. Throughout the dive, the internal body temperature remains close to 38 degrees Celsius or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the crushing pressure and the freezing water surrounding every feather. Eventually, the climb begins. The heart gradually increases its rhythm as the surface approaches. Fresh air fills the lungs, oxygen reserves are restored, and the entire sequence becomes ready to unfold once more. Nothing in the cycle appears hurried. The descent, the hunt, the ascent, and the next breath form a continuous pattern repeated countless times across an emperor penguin's life, each dive demonstrating a physiology refined through incremental change across immense spans of evolutionary history. Life above the water demands endurance equal to anything required below it. Emperor penguins breed during the Antarctic winter, when temperatures may fall to -40 degrees Celsius or -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Darkness stretches across the polar night, and the nesting ground offers no trees, cliffs, or sheltered valleys. The broad sea ice becomes both nursery and refuge, supporting colonies that remain exposed to relentless wind for weeks at a time. The male balances a single egg upon his feet beneath a fold of feathered skin known as the brood pouch. For about 65 days, he eats nothing. Stored fat gradually disappears until body weight may decline by as much as 45%. Some males exhaust those reserves before their partners return from distant feeding grounds, revealing how narrow the margin for survival can become during a successful breeding season. When thousands gather together, another adaptation appears without any single bird directing it. The huddle shifts continuously as individuals exchange positions between the exposed outer edge and the warmer interior. Heat spreads through the moving mass, reducing energy loss by as much as 50% compared with standing alone. Researchers have shown that these coordinated movements resemble the behavior of flowing materials, a reminder that the emperor penguin has become an organism shaped as much by cooperation as by the remarkable body carried within each individual. Across a broad plain of Antarctic sea ice, individual identity seems to dissolve into repetition. An emperor penguin colony may contain 500,000 birds, each carrying the same dark back, bright chest, and warm wash of yellow across the throat. At a distance, the colony resembles a single living landscape instead of countless separate lives. Wind moves through the gathering, snow drifts between standing bodies, and almost nothing visible distinguishes one bird from another. A parent, returning after nearly 2 months at sea, enters this immense assembly carrying an astonishing task. Somewhere within the shifting crowd waits one lifelong partner and one growing chick. The search unfolds during darkness, through powerful winds, and in temperatures capable of freezing exposed human skin within minutes. Vision alone offers almost no help. Every direction presents another sea of nearly identical shapes, each standing upon the same featureless ice. Recognition comes through sound. Each emperor penguin possesses a vocal signature, unlike any other member of the colony. Careful recordings examined through spectrographic analysis have revealed subtle differences in timing, frequency, and harmonic structure that remain stable enough for individuals to recognize one another with remarkable consistency. A returning adult calls into the crowded air, and somewhere within the layered chorus, the intended listener separates that familiar pattern from thousands of competing voices. This extraordinary precision begins with the avian vocal organ known as the syrinx. Unlike the human voice box, the syrinx allows emperor penguins to produce two independent sound frequencies at the same time. Those paired frequencies combine into a complex acoustic pattern resembling a musical chord. Small differences in each frequency, together with their harmonic relationship, create an audible identity that belongs to one individual alone. Every call becomes a personal signature carried across the frozen landscape. Learning these signatures begins almost immediately after a chick emerges from its shell. Within only a few days, the chick starts memorizing the voices of its parents, while the parents also become familiar with the developing call of their offspring. As weeks pass and long feeding journeys repeatedly separate the family, those memories grow stronger. When the adults eventually return from distant waters, the vocal bond bridges every absence, allowing parents and chicks to reunite despite prolonged separation and overwhelming background noise. The sound surrounding a large emperor penguin colony has left a lasting impression on researchers fortunate enough to witness it firsthand. Hundreds of thousands of overlapping calls blend with the movement of wind across the ice, producing an acoustic environment unlike almost anything else on Earth. Human listeners often struggle to identify the source of even a single voice within the continuous chorus. Emperor penguins accomplish exactly that, finding one familiar call within countless others that reach their ears at the same moment. No flying bird gathers in communities approaching this density, so no ancestor soaring above forests or coastlines ever required such an ability. The challenge emerged only after penguins embraced life beside the Southern Ocean, where breeding on sea ice concentrated enormous populations into a shared space. Natural selection gradually favored individuals capable of recognizing a single voice amid overwhelming sound, preserving families that could reunite after long journeys across open water. The sky gave their ancestors wings. The ocean reshaped those wings into flippers. The frozen continent then demanded another invention altogether, one carried not in feathers or bone, but in sound, memory, and the remarkable ability to recognize one familiar voice among 500,000 others. The calendar followed by emperor penguins seems to run opposite to expectation. They begin raising their young during the Antarctic winter, when darkness stretches across the continent and temperatures sink lower than at any other season. Such timing appears improbable until the rhythm of the sea ice comes into view. By entering the breeding cycle at the harshest point of the year, each chick gains enough time to grow waterproof feathers and develop the strength needed for life at sea before summer loosens the frozen coast and opens access to abundant food. The journey begins during April and May as winter settles across Antarctica. Adults leave the edge of the open ocean and walk inland, across newly hardened sea ice toward breeding grounds used by generations before them. Some colonies travel 50 kilometers, which is about 31 miles. Others continue for 120 kilometers, which is about 75 miles. The destination is chosen with remarkable care, resting upon stable ice, expected to remain intact throughout the long incubation period, instead of breaking apart beneath the colony. When the female lays her single egg, one of the most delicate exchanges in nature follows. The egg must pass from her feet onto the waiting feet of the male without touching the frozen surface. Even brief exposure to the surrounding cold can prove fatal to the developing chick. Once the transfer succeeds, the male covers the egg with a fold of feathered skin called the brood pouch, sealing it against his warm body while the female returns to the sea to feed. For about 65 days, the male remains with the egg through the polar night. Temperatures regularly fall below minus 40 degrees Celsius or minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds may exceed 200 kilometers per hour, which is about 124 miles per hour, sweeping across the open ice without interruption. Throughout this period, he does not eat. Every step, every heartbeat, and every moment of warmth depends upon energy stored months earlier as body fat. Those reserves steadily diminish. A male emperor penguin may lose as much as 45% of his body weight before the female returns. The scale of this sacrifice becomes clearer through comparison. It resembles a person weighing 90 kilograms, losing about 40 kilograms without consuming a single meal. Each day draws upon tissues carefully accumulated during the previous feeding season, transforming stored energy into warmth, movement, and the continuing protection of the egg balanced above the ice. If the chick emerges before its mother returns, another remarkable adaptation carries the family through the final interval. The father produces a nourishing secretion from his crop, rich in proteins and fats formed from his own remaining reserves. Although this temporary food cannot sustain the chick indefinitely, it provides enough nourishment for the first days of life until the female arrives carrying a stomach filled with food gathered from the distant ocean. Sometimes the returning female is delayed by weather, shifting sea ice, or the uncertain search for prey. The father's remaining strength eventually reaches its limit. If his reserves are exhausted, he must leave for the sea or perish beside the chick. Such moments reveal no flaw in devotion. They mark the boundary imposed by biology itself, where survival and reproduction balance upon the narrowest possible margin. Every part of this extraordinary cycle follows the seasonal pulse of Antarctic sea ice. The march inland, the fasting, the shared care of a single egg, the crowded warmth of the colony, and the reunion through familiar voices all depend upon a frozen landscape arriving and departing with dependable timing. The lives of emperor penguins remain woven into that rhythm with remarkable precision. The oldest chapters of the penguin story unfold far from drifting sea ice. Their lineage first expanded along temperate and tropical shores, where cool, food-rich oceans met coastlines warmed by climates that looked nothing like the frozen landscapes many people now associate with these birds. Ice would shape later generations, though the earliest penguins belonged to a different world, one where the sea, not the weather overhead, determined the opportunities for survival. One of the earliest known penguins, Waimanu, lived along the coast of what is now New Zealand's South Island. During that distant age, the surrounding environment supported a temperate shoreline with forests extending close to the water's edge. The climate remained considerably warmer than that of present-day Antarctica. Even so, Waimanu already displayed the body plan of a committed diver. Its wings had begun the long transformation into flippers, showing that the shift toward underwater hunting had started long before freezing conditions entered the picture. Millions of years later, another giant appeared, much farther north. Icodiptus hunted in seas, bordering what is now Peru, close to the equator, around 36 million years ago. Warm tropical waters surrounded its home, while schools of fish flourished because cold currents rising from the deep carried nutrients toward the surface. The bird itself reached impressive size, demonstrating that large penguins once thrived in environments where snow never accumulated and ice never formed along the shore. That pattern continues into the present through one remarkable survivor. The Galapagos penguin lives directly on the equator, raising chicks on volcanic islands where daytime air temperatures regularly exceed 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. At first glance, such a place appears completely unsuited for penguins. The surrounding ocean tells a different story. Cool currents flowing from the south and nutrient-rich upwelling create productive feeding grounds that sustain fish, squid, and the birds that depend upon them. Air temperature alone offers very little guidance about where penguins belong. This distinction reveals an essential truth about the family. Penguins are not defined by cold air. They are shaped by cold water. Marine upwelling carries minerals and nutrients from deep layers toward the sunlit surface, fueling blooms of microscopic organisms that support fish, squid, and countless other animals. Wherever these productive waters rise, penguins find dependable hunting grounds. The atmosphere above may be chilly, mild, or even warm, while the ocean beneath remains the decisive influence. The same principle explains why penguins occupy coastlines separated by entire oceans. The Humboldt Current along western South America, the Benguela Current beside southern Africa, and the cool waters surrounding the Galapagos Islands each transport nutrient-rich water toward the surface. Penguins follow these currents with remarkable consistency because their prey gathers where marine productivity reaches its greatest intensity. The current itself matters more than the latitude through which it flows. Seen through this wider history, the frozen South becomes one chapter instead of the entire narrative. Ice provided new opportunities for certain species, especially emperor penguins, yet the deeper evolutionary thread has always remained tied to productive oceans. As those waters change in temperature, the distribution of nutrients and prey changes with them. The future of penguins, therefore, depends less upon the presence of ice alone than upon the enduring health of the cold marine currents that first welcomed their ancestors millions of years ago. A different ocean gradually emerged from the movement of continents. Coastlines drifted apart over immense spans of time, opening a deep marine gateway between South America and Antarctica. Around 34 million years ago, during the transition between the Eocene and Oligocene epochs. This rearrangement of the planet altered the circulation of the southern seas and began the long cooling that would define the modern world. As the Drake Passage widened and deepened, water gained an uninterrupted path around Antarctica. From this opening arose the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, an immense river of ocean flowing endlessly around the continent. Its circular motion limited the arrival of warmer northern waters, leaving Antarctica increasingly isolated within its own cold marine ring. The surrounding ocean changed first, followed by the atmosphere above it as temperatures declined across the far south through countless generations. Ice expanded across the continent with growing persistence. Glaciers spread outward, permanent ice sheets thickened, and seasonal sea ice reached farther across the surrounding ocean. The Southern Ocean became colder and more demanding, yet those same conditions transformed its living richness. Cold water retains more dissolved oxygen than warm water, allowing marine ecosystems to support extraordinary abundance. Tiny drifting organisms multiplied, followed by dense swarms of krill, schools of fish, and hunting grounds filled with squid. A harsher environment unfolded beside a steadily expanding banquet. Penguins entered this changing world, carrying the legacy of warmer ancestors. The giant forms that once flourished along temperate and tropical shores gradually disappeared or gave way to relatives built for different conditions. Fossils appearing after the Eocene-Oligocene transition reveal increasingly compact body plans, reducing heat loss while improving efficiency in colder seas. Generation after generation, natural selection favored individuals able to dive through frigid water, preserve body warmth, and exploit food concentrated by the reshaped ocean. Each adaptation strengthened another. Dense waterproof plumage, insulating fat, efficient circulation, oxygen storage within muscles, and powerful underwater propulsion all gained greater value as the Southern Ocean cooled. The sea became more difficult to inhabit, though it rewarded successful hunters with dependable resources. Evolution, therefore, moved along a narrow path where greater endurance unlocked greater opportunity. The birds most suited to these demanding waters survived, reproduced, and carried those traits forward into future populations. Much later, these accumulated changes opened possibilities unimaginable to their distant ancestors. Some descendants eventually occupied sea ice itself, raising young where darkness, wind, and freezing temperatures excluded nearly every other bird. Such achievements did not appear in a single evolutionary leap. They emerged through countless refinements, each building upon earlier successes shaped by the cooling world surrounding Antarctica. An intriguing detail completes this history. Penguins, as a lineage, extend back roughly 60 million years. Yet the common ancestor, shared by every living penguin species, lived only about 12.7 million years ago. The birds seen across the southern hemisphere today therefore represent a comparatively recent branch of a far older family tree. Their diversity belongs entirely to the world created after the Great Cooling, a world where shifting continents redirected the oceans, transformed climates, and prepared the stage upon which modern penguins would flourish. The ice that shaped modern penguins never remained fixed in one place. Across the last 2.5 million years, Earth entered more than 50 major glacial episodes, each one rearranging coastlines, ocean currents, and the living geography of the southern hemisphere. Every advance of continental ice redrew the map upon which penguin colonies depended, replacing familiar breeding shores with frozen barriers while opening entirely different habitats elsewhere. As glaciers expanded toward the sea, nesting grounds disappeared beneath growing ice sheets. Sea ice stretched farther from the continent, increasing the distance between stable breeding sites and the open water where adults found fish, squid, and krill. A successful colony depended upon balancing both needs at once. If breeding areas became inaccessible, reproduction failed. If feeding grounds drifted too far away, adults exhausted valuable energy before returning to their chicks. Survival rested upon maintaining that delicate connection between land, sea ice, and productive ocean. The changing climate also altered marine circulation. Cold currents shifted position, regions of nutrient-rich upwelling expanded or contracted, and the distribution of prey followed those movements. Colonies that had flourished for thousands of years sometimes found themselves beside increasingly unproductive waters, while distant coastlines suddenly became favorable. Penguins responded through gradual relocation whenever suitable habitat remained within reach. Entire populations disappeared where no refuge existed, leaving only scattered groups occupying isolated stretches of coastline spared by the advancing ice. These repeated contractions remain visible within the genetic history of living penguins. Modern studies of inherited genetic variation reveal unmistakable signatures of ancient population bottlenecks, periods when once numerous colonies declined into comparatively small, separated groups. Such reductions removed many genetic lineages forever. When warmer intervals returned and glaciers retreated, surviving populations expanded outward again, repopulating newly exposed shores with descendants of the limited number of birds that had endured the harshest conditions. Evidence suggests that emperor penguins experienced one of these severe contractions during the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago. Their total population may have fallen to only a few 100,000 individuals before recovering across the following millennia. Today, the global population approaches roughly 600,000 birds, carrying within its shared ancestry the memory of that earlier decline. The recovery appears impressive, yet it emerged from a comparatively narrow genetic foundation established by survivors rather than the greater diversity that existed beforehand. The present distribution of emperor colonies still reflects those ancient refuges. Many breeding sites occupy coastal regions that likely remained suitable through periods when neighboring landscapes vanished beneath expanding ice. These locations became reservoirs of continuity, preserving enough individuals to restore the species once conditions improved. Every colony, therefore, represents more than a gathering of birds. It also marks a place where an unbroken evolutionary thread persisted while surrounding habitats repeatedly disappeared. Seen across this immense span of time, every glacial advance acted as a relentless filter. Colonies unable to adapt vanished from the record, while others carried their lineage forward through another climatic transformation. Modern penguins are descendants of repeated survival rather than uninterrupted abundance. Their history demonstrates that changing habitats can reshape an entire species without erasing it completely, leaving enduring traces inside coastlines, populations, and the inherited patterns written across generations. From above, an emperor penguin colony appears almost fluid. Thousands of dark backs press together across the sea ice until the boundary between one bird and the next begins to disappear. The eye searches for individuals, yet discovers shifting patterns instead, as though the colony itself has become the creature, while each penguin serves as one living part within it. Some emperor colonies contain 200,000 or more birds. Certain Adelie penguin colonies have exceeded 500,000 breeding pairs gathered in a single location, creating one of the greatest concentrations of large warm-blooded animals anywhere on Earth. Such density might seem impossible across an open sheet of ice, yet it forms the foundation upon which the breeding season depends. Every bird contributes to conditions that no individual could maintain alone. When Antarctic winter pushes air temperatures toward minus 40 degrees Celsius or minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, survival depends upon sharing warmth as efficiently as possible. A lone emperor penguin loses body heat far more rapidly than one surrounded by companions. Measurements show that the tightly packed huddle can reduce individual heat loss by as much as 50%. That difference represents far more than comfort. It preserves precious energy, reserves that must last through weeks without food, while an egg or newly hatched chick remains balanced upon the parent's feet. The gathering never freezes into a motionless circle. Every few moments, tiny adjustments ripple across its surface. Birds exposed along the windward edge gradually drift inward, while others emerge from protected positions to take their place. No leader directs the exchange. Each penguin responds to the movement of nearby neighbors until the entire assembly rotates almost continuously. Exposure becomes shared across the colony instead of remaining concentrated upon the same individuals hour after hour. Researchers studying these movements discovered that the shifting patterns resemble the behavior of flowing materials. Mathematical models describe the colony using principles similar to those governing fluid motion, where countless local interactions create organized movement across the whole structure. Each penguin follows immediate physical cues, yet the colony behaves like a distributed system that continually improves heat retention without central control. Order emerges from many small responses unfolding together. The same concentration also provides protection from hunters. A predator searching the colony encounters an immense field of nearly identical bodies moving in subtle coordination. Distinguishing one individual from another becomes far more difficult when visual features repeat across hundreds of thousands of birds. This confusion echoes strategies found among schooling fish and swirling flocks of starlings, where overwhelming numbers reduce the likelihood that any single animal becomes the chosen target. Living amid such extraordinary density has shaped penguin minds as well as their bodies. Adults navigate crowded breeding grounds, recognize precise locations within sprawling colonies, coordinate movements with surrounding neighbors, and identify mates or offspring through distinctive vocal signatures carried across constant background sound. These abilities exceed those expected in many birds that spend most of their lives apart from others, reflecting generations shaped by social complexity as much as by ice and ocean. Seen from within, the colony is a landscape of countless companions. Seen across evolutionary time, it becomes something larger still, a collective survival machine whose strength arises from cooperation, allowing each individual life to continue through the shared rhythm of the whole. Few sites overturn expectation as completely as a penguin standing beneath an equatorial sun. Dark volcanic rock absorbs the day's warmth while waves break against the shore, and air temperatures regularly climb above 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Here, on Fernandina Island and Isabella Island within the Galapagos archipelago, the only penguin that naturally lives north of the equator carries forward a lineage often imagined as belonging only to drifting ice. Its body reveals a different solution to survival than that of its southern relatives. Bare patches of skin around the face allow excess heat to escape into the surrounding air. During the hottest hours, the bird pants to increase cooling through evaporation, then retreats into the shade cast by lava formations or coastal cliffs until conditions become more favorable. Adaptations like these preserve life beneath tropical skies, although they would become deadly liabilities across the frozen shores where emperor penguins endure the opposite thermal challenge. The apparent contradiction disappears when attention shifts from the land to the sea. Beneath the surface, the Humboldt Current and the Cromwell Current deliver cold, nutrient-rich water from the deep Pacific Ocean. Those currents generate powerful upwelling that lifts dissolved nutrients toward sunlight, feeding blooms of microscopic life that support fish, squid, and countless other marine creatures. The coastline above may feel tropical, yet the waters below provide the same productive conditions that have sustained penguins throughout their long evolutionary history. This pattern reaches backward, across roughly 60 million years. Early members of the penguin family occupied warm coastlines long before Antarctica became wrapped in permanent ice. Later generations spread wherever dependable feeding grounds appeared, following productive oceans instead of particular climates. Ice became important for certain species because it accompanied rich marine ecosystems, not because frozen landscapes themselves defined what a penguin needed. The Galapagos penguin preserves that history in living form, reminding us that the sea has always shaped the family's destiny more profoundly than the air above it. Its future, however, remains uncertain. Fewer than 2,000 individuals are thought to survive today. Periodic El Niño events weaken the normal pattern of ocean circulation, suppressing the upwelling that ordinarily supplies cold water and abundant prey. Fish populations decline, squid becomes scarce, and breeding often fails across much of the population. Adults may abandon nesting attempts as their own energy reserves diminish, while chicks already hatched struggle to survive until conditions improve. A single prolonged disruption can echo through several breeding seasons because so few birds remain. The challenge facing this species reflects a broader truth shared across every branch of the penguin family. Their lives depend upon reliable currents that gather nourishment from the deep and concentrate it within reach. When those currents shift, productive waters move elsewhere, leaving colonies bound to coastlines that can no longer sustain them. Unlike many land animals, penguins cannot replace an entire marine ecosystem by walking across a neighboring landscape. One lineage journeyed toward Antarctica, another settled beside the equator. Both arrived through the same evolutionary passage that exchanged wings built for flight for bodies shaped by the sea. Across every latitude where penguins endure, the destination has always been the ocean, whose changing rhythms continue to write the boundaries of their world. A shoreline filled with living penguins offers only the final pages of a much longer story. The fossil record reveals a family tree crowded with branches that no longer reach the present. Around 70 penguin species have been identified from ancient rocks scattered across the southern hemisphere, yet fewer than 20 survive today. Every modern colony is therefore a small remnant of a lineage that once explored a far wider range of shapes, sizes, and ways of living than the world now remembers. Among those vanished birds was Incayacu paracacensis, whose name means water king. Discovered in Peru during the year 2010, it lived about 36 million years ago, when warm seas still covered much of the region. Tiny pigment-carrying structures preserved inside its feathers allowed researchers to reconstruct their original colors. Instead of the familiar black back and white chest seen across living penguins, this species carried reddish-brown and gray plumage. The familiar pattern worn by modern penguins emerged later, showing that even one of their most recognizable features belongs to evolution rather than permanence. Another remarkable branch appeared in what is now New Zealand. Kairuku waitaki possessed a long, slender body and an unusually narrow beak, unlike that of any living penguin. Such proportions hint at a hunting style that differed from its relatives. Perhaps it pursued prey at different depths, targeted different fish, or searched through parts of the water column that neighboring penguins rarely visited. The fossil preserves bones instead of behavior, yet its anatomy suggests that multiple ecological roles once existed within the penguin family, each representing a distinct solution to life in the ocean. The oldest known penguin, Waimanu, carries an even deeper message. Its skeleton captures a body midway through transformation. The wings had already begun abandoning flight, although they still retained proportions that recalled airborne ancestors. Dense flipper bones, shortened joints, and other familiar adaptations had not yet reached their modern form. Waimanu therefore preserves an intermediate stage within a gradual sequence, demonstrating that the transition from sky to sea unfolded through many small anatomical changes instead of one sudden leap. Each extinct lineage can be viewed as an evolutionary experiment conducted across countless generations. A particular body shape succeeded while conditions favored it, then disappeared after the surrounding world shifted. Ocean temperatures changed, prey communities reorganized, new predators arrived, coastlines moved, or isolated populations dwindled through chance alone. Survival never depended upon perfection. It depended upon remaining well matched to an environment that never stopped changing. Looking only at living penguins might suggest that evolution followed a direct path toward the emperor, the Adelie, or the Galapagos penguin. Fossils reveal something very different. The history resembles a branching tree whose limbs spread in many directions before most eventually ended. Modern species inherited only a small portion of that former diversity, carrying forward traits that happen to remain useful through changing climates and changing seas. Those missing branches leave more than gaps within museum collections. They remind us that extinction has always been part of penguin history, trimming possibilities that once flourished. The birds standing along today's coastlines are neither inevitable nor permanent. They are the surviving descendants of a family tested repeatedly by an ocean that has always rewarded adaptation while offering no guarantee that every successful design will endure forever. Before scientists measured feathers, mapped colonies, or traced family trees through fossils, penguins entered human history through surprise. Sailors approaching unfamiliar coasts expected seals, whales, and seabirds. They did not expect upright creatures that gathered in great numbers, walked across rocky ground with an almost deliberate gait, and showed little concern when strangers stepped ashore. The earliest written descriptions reveal as much about the astonishment of the observers as they do about the birds themselves. Portuguese mariners rounding the Cape of Good Hope during the late 15th century encountered what is now known as the African penguin. Their accounts described feathered animals standing like people, calling with voices compared to donkeys, and refusing to scatter despite repeated attempts to chase them away. Such reactions become easier to understand when viewed through unfamiliar eyes. Flying birds normally escaped at the first sign of danger. These birds remain together, relying upon instincts shaped by predators very different from humans. Their confidence reflected an evolutionary history that had unfolded for millions of years without anticipating visitors carrying sails and weapons. The African penguin colonies those sailors encountered were far larger than the scattered populations surviving today. Historical evidence suggests breeding grounds once stretched across much of the southern African coastline in extraordinary abundance. Harvesting of eggs, hunting for meat, disturbance by passing ships, and later commercial collection steadily reduced their numbers across centuries. The decline therefore began long before modern industrial fishing or contemporary environmental change became additional pressures upon the species. Only a few decades later, another meeting unfolded along the southern coast of South America. During the circumnavigation led by Ferdinand Magellan, the chronicler Antonio Pigafetta recorded birds resembling geese that could not fly. His comparison captured visible features while missing their deeper identity. The animals were almost certainly Magellanic penguins, descendants of a lineage already separated from flying birds through tens of millions of years of evolution. Taxonomy had not yet developed into a scientific discipline, leaving explorers to describe unfamiliar life with the vocabulary they already possessed. As exploration pushed farther south, emperor penguins inspired a different response. Members of expeditions led by Robert Falcon Scott, Ernest Shackleton, and Douglas Mawson observed birds enduring conditions that challenged every human traveler. Their journals combined careful measurements with reflections shaped by familiarity. Upright posture, patient movements, and close social bonds encouraged comparisons with human communities. Such impressions became deeply rooted in popular imagination, influencing books, illustrations, and later films that often emphasized personality before biology. One observer complicated that comforting picture. During the Terra Nova expedition in the year 1911, George Murray Levick carefully documented breeding behavior in Adelie penguins. His notebooks described aggression, forced mating, and other reproductive behaviors that clashed sharply with the innocent public image already forming around penguins. Editors considered many passages unsuitable for publication, and substantial portions remained withheld until their complete release in the year 2012. The birds themselves had changed nothing. Human expectations had shaped what people believed nature ought to look like. Knowledge of emperor penguins advanced through equally gradual steps. A specimen collected during the expedition of James Clark Ross between the years 1840 and 1843 introduced science to the species. Yet another 60 years passed before anyone witnessed their winter breeding cycle directly. Reaching those colonies demanded journeys across conditions that had already claimed numerous lives. Each observation, therefore, represented persistence as much as discovery, adding another piece to a relationship that continues to evolve as people learn to see penguins less as familiar characters and more as remarkable products of Earth's long history. Nothing in the Antarctic world remains separate from the sea ice. It is the platform beneath breeding colonies, the seasonal shelter for tiny drifting life, and the foundation supporting one of the richest marine ecosystems on Earth. When that platform changes, every layer above it shifts as well. Measurements collected across recent decades show that Antarctic sea ice has become less predictable, with unusually low extents occurring more frequently than researchers expected from earlier climate projections. The change begins with organisms almost too small to notice. Krill spend the winter closely associated with sea ice, feeding on algae growing across its lower surface while gaining protection from many predators. A shorter season of stable ice leaves less time for those algae to develop and narrows the opportunity for young krill to survive. Fish, squid, seals, whales, and penguins all depend directly or indirectly upon that abundance. As each level receives a smaller share, the effects spread through the food web with remarkable consistency. For emperor penguins, the calendar has little flexibility. Chicks hatch while the sea ice still forms a secure nursery, remaining covered in soft down that provides warmth on land but offers no protection in freezing seawater. They must remain with their parents until their juvenile feathers complete the waterproof molt. If the supporting ice fractures too early, the young enter the ocean before their bodies are prepared. Water quickly reaches the skin, body temperature falls, and survival becomes unlikely within a very short time. Events during the breeding season of the year 2023 revealed how narrow that margin has become. Researchers, using satellite observations, found breeding failures associated with early sea ice loss in 14 of the 66 known emperor penguin colonies. Tens of thousands of chicks were likely lost after the breeding platform disappeared before fledging could occur. Although the previous breeding season affected even more colonies, the year 2023 still ranked as the second worst season recorded since this continent-wide satellite monitoring began. In the year 2018, other penguin species reflect the same pattern through different pathways. Along the coast of Argentina, one of the world's longest continuous studies of Magellanic penguins has documented increasing losses from heavy rain, heat, and powerful storms. Across an average breeding season, extreme weather accounts for roughly 7% of chick deaths. During particularly severe years, those events can contribute to nearly half of all chick mortality, altering the outcome of an entire generation before the birds ever reach the sea. These observations do not describe distant possibilities waiting beyond the horizon. They emerge from water temperature records, satellite measurements of sea ice, and breeding colonies watched year after year until ordinary seasons became distinguishable from extraordinary ones. Penguins have endured volcanic upheaval, changing oceans, advancing glaciers, and retreating ice across millions of years. Their history demonstrates remarkable resilience, yet every adaptation described along this journey depends upon one enduring condition. The sea must continue providing stable places to breed and productive cold waters rich enough to sustain the generations that follow. When those foundations weaken together, the limits of even a lineage shaped by deep time begin to appear. A word changed, and with it came the weight of many decades of observation. In April of the year 2026, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the global scientific authority responsible for evaluating extinction risk, reclassified the emperor penguin from near threatened to endangered on the red list of threatened species. The announcement did not describe a sudden disaster unfolding across Antarctica. It marked the moment when accumulated evidence became too consistent to ignore, bringing together satellite records, field observations, climate research, and population modeling into a single conclusion about the direction this species is traveling. The decision was not driven by an immediate collapse in numbers. Nearly 595,000 adult emperor penguins are still estimated to exist around Antarctica. Many colonies continue to return to their traditional breeding grounds each year, raising chicks whenever the sea ice remains stable long enough. Viewed in isolation, those figures could suggest resilience. The concern lies elsewhere, within the long pattern emerging from measurements collected across many breeding seasons, revealing a future increasingly shaped by shrinking sea ice rather than the present abundance of birds. Climate models examining current greenhouse gas emission pathways indicate that Antarctic sea ice is expected to continue declining through the coming decades. As breeding platforms disappear more frequently and food webs become less dependable, projections suggest the global emperor penguin population could decline by roughly one half before the decade of the 2080s draws to a close. Even more concerning is the fate of individual colonies, each functioning as its own community across the frozen coastline. Researchers describe one important threshold as quasi extinction. The phrase does not mean every bird has disappeared. Instead, it marks the point where a colony becomes so small that successful long term recovery is no longer expected. Too few breeding adults remain to sustain healthy reproduction across generations. Underwarming limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius or 35 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial conditions. Approximately 19% of emperor penguin colonies are projected to reach that threshold by the end of this century. At 2 degrees Celsius or 36 degrees Fahrenheit, the estimate rises to about 31%. Under present emission trajectories, projections indicate that approximately 98% of colonies could reach quasi-extinction before the century concludes. The pattern extends beyond a single species. King penguins rely upon productive Southern Ocean feeding grounds that are also shifting as water temperatures rise. Research indicates that every increase of 0.26 degrees Celsius, or about 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit, in Southern Ocean temperature corresponds with an average reduction of roughly 9% in king penguin populations. Under the highest projected warming scenarios, at least 2 of their 8 major breeding regions are expected to become permanently unsuitable, forcing birds to search for habitats that may offer fewer opportunities for successful nesting. All of these findings return to a single realization: penguins have endured volcanic upheaval, drifting continents, advancing glaciers, and changing oceans throughout an evolutionary journey stretching across millions of years. The challenge now unfolds with unusual speed, altering the sea ice that supports breeding, the currents that nourish prey, and the seasonal rhythm upon which each generation depends. The endangered classification recognizes that the future of the emperor penguin has become closely connected to choices made far beyond Antarctica, where decisions about greenhouse gas emissions will shape the stability of the frozen world. these remarkable birds require. Some journeys become so complete that no trail remains for the return. Across roughly 60 million years of penguin history, the fossil record preserves one of evolution's clearest examples of that truth. Biologists describe it through Dallow's law, the principle that once a complex biological structure has been lost through evolution, it does not arise again in precisely the same form. Among penguins, every known fossil and every living species follows that pattern with remarkable consistency, leaving behind an uninterrupted record of change, moving in only one direction. No penguin has ever regained the ability to fly. More than 70 known species have occupied changing oceans through drifting continents, advancing glaciers, shifting currents, and repeated environmental upheaval. Some lineages flourished for millions of years before disappearing, while others endured and produced descendants still living today. Throughout every branch of that history, wings remained devoted to swimming. The open sky, once the realm of their distant ancestors, never became their destination again. Stone preserves each stage of that transformation with unusual clarity. Early penguins still carried traces of their airborne heritage, yet each succeeding form moved farther from it. Wing bones gradually shortened until broad flippers replaced lifting surfaces. Hollow spaces inside the bones filled with dense material, adding weight that reduced buoyancy beneath the waves. Flexible joints narrowed their range of motion as stronger, more stable structures evolved for powerful underwater strokes. Primary flight feathers disappeared because smooth, tightly packed plumage served swimming more effectively. Every alteration supported the next, making reversal progressively less likely with each passing generation. Even so, the body still carries reminders of an earlier design. The broad keel running along the breastbone continues to anchor large muscles, although those muscles now drive flippers instead of wings through the air. Inside every flipper, the familiar arrangement of upper arm, forearm, wrist, and finger bones remains recognizable to any anatomist. The blueprint belongs unmistakably to a flying bird, although its purpose has been rewritten through millions of years of adaptation to life at sea. One remarkable fossil offers another glimpse of that lingering inheritance. Anthropornis nordenskjoldi, the towering penguin that lived during the Eocene, retained a slightly bent wing joint, unlike the stiffer flippers of many later forms. That subtle bend echoed the elbow flexibility once essential for powered flight in distant ancestors. By the time Anthropornis nordenskjoldi walked along southern shores, the feature no longer restored flight or even hinted at its return. It remained only as a fading structural memory preserved within bone. Seen together, these fossils tell a story written through accumulation instead of sudden transformation. Every generation inherited bodies already shaped by countless earlier decisions made through natural selection. As each useful swimming adaptation spread through a population, older structures became less capable of performing their original role. Eventually, the biological information required to rebuild a flying wing no longer existed as a complete set of instructions. The ocean had become the place where survival unfolded, while the architecture of flight dissolved piece by piece into history. What remained was not an incomplete bird, but one exquisitely refined for another world, carrying within its skeleton enduring echoes of the path that brought it there. There is a pattern that emerges only after millions of years have been allowed to speak together. It is written across fossils, living bodies, vanished species, and every generation that inherited a world already shaped by those before it. The penguin reveals that evolution is less a series of dramatic moments than an accumulation of countless small changes, each almost imperceptible on its own, yet together capable of transforming an entire lineage beyond recognition. No ancestor stood at the shoreline and exchanged the sky for the sea. There was never a single leap into a different existence. Each generation contained individuals that dived a little more efficiently, remained underwater a little longer, or found food with slightly greater success beneath the surface. Those birds left more descendants, passing along traits that favored life in water. At the same time, the qualities supporting powerful flight became a little less essential. Across immense stretches of time, these tiny differences accumulated until the balance shifted completely. Without intention, awareness, or destination, evolution continued refining what worked in one environment while allowing another set of abilities to fade. That gradual process becomes striking because the final result appears almost purposeful. Looking at a modern penguin, every feature seems designed for a single way of living. Dense bones steady the body during deep dives. Blood carries oxygen with remarkable efficiency through prolonged descents. Eyes remain effective in dim underwater light. Feathers interlock into a waterproof covering that traps insulating air against the skin. A carefully regulated heartbeat stretches each breath farther beneath the waves. Parents locate one chick among enormous colonies by recognizing an individual voice carried across wind and ice. Every trait belongs to the same coordinated system, although no guiding plan ever assembled it. Each improvement carried an unseen cost. Hollow bones that once favored flight disappeared as greater density improved underwater control. Long flight feathers gave way to short, overlapping plumage better suited for reducing drag. Wings became rigid flippers, whose strength increased as flexibility diminished. The capacity to ride rising air currents across open oceans faded with every generation that depended less upon the sky. None of those changes represented failure. Each reflected success within a different world, where survival rewarded another collection of abilities. What emerged in return exceeded anything their distant ancestors could have accomplished. Emperor penguins descend more than 535 meters, which is about 1,756 feet, on a single breath, reaching depths where darkness and pressure shape every movement. They pursue prey through water cold enough to overwhelm an unprotected human within minutes. During the Antarctic winter, adults endure air temperatures approaching minus 40 degrees Celsius or minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, while maintaining a difference of roughly 40 degrees Celsius or 72 degrees Fahrenheit between their warm bodies and the surrounding air. Such capacities arose through countless refinements layered one upon another across geological time. Seen from that perspective, the penguin is neither a bird that surrendered flight nor one that conquered the sea. It became something entirely its own, molded by the accumulated influence of selection acting patiently through millions of years. The sky remains part of its ancestry, preserved in bones and inherited patterns, while the ocean became the place where every irreversible change found its lasting purpose. The story began with an ordinary seabird following food beneath the waves. Nothing in that distant moment announced the arrival of a new kind of life. There was only another dive into an inviting ocean, repeated across generations until repetition became transformation. Over roughly 60 million years, that familiar bird disappeared, replaced by a descendant unlike anything that had come before, shaped not through intention, but through the patient accumulation of successful changes. The result was a bird that learned to fly through water instead of air. Oxygen became stored in muscles rich with the pigments that held each breath a little longer. The heartbeat could slow dramatically during deep dives, conserving precious reserves until the surface returned. Eyes adapted to a world where light faded with depth, while dense bones steadied every movement beneath the waves. Waterproof feathers trapped insulating air against the body, allowing long journeys through freezing seas. Within immense colonies, each parent recognized the unique voice of its own chick among hundreds of thousands of nearly identical calls. Every feature belonged to the same remarkable inheritance, refined by countless generations living within the ocean's demands. That transformation unfolded across spans of time almost beyond imagination. It began after the extinction that ended the age of the non-avian dinosaurs. It continued while continents drifted apart, ocean currents reorganized, Antarctica froze beneath expanding ice, and more than 50 major glacial cycles reshaped coastlines again and again. Entire branches of the penguin family vanished forever, while others endured repeated population collapses before recovering when conditions improved. Through every upheaval, the lineage continued, carrying forward adaptations that proved successful in changing seas. Today, only 18 living species remain from a family once far more diverse. They occupy places that seem separated by climate, yet united by water. Emperor penguins breed upon Antarctic sea ice. King penguins gather on sub-Antarctic islands washed by nutrient-rich currents. Galapagos penguins live beside the equator, where cool upwelling supports the fish they depend upon despite warm tropical air. Their homes differ greatly above the surface, although each species follows the same enduring rule established millions of years ago. Productive oceans determine where penguins can thrive. Looking back across their history, the question that guided this journey finds an answer both straightforward and deeply surprising. Penguins did not abandon the sky through a single dramatic event. Generation after generation inherited bodies slightly better suited for diving, while the value of flight gradually diminished. The ocean offered opportunities unavailable above the waves, and natural selection continued rewarding those able to reach them more effectively. Little by little, an exchange unfolded until there was no practical path back. The sky remains preserved as an echo within every flipper, every bone, and every stage of embryonic development. The sea became the place where those inherited structures found a new purpose beyond anything their flying ancestors could have achieved. An emperor penguin standing upon Antarctic ice today carries the accumulated history of that exchange within every feather and every heartbeat. Its future, like so much of its past, remains inseparable from the condition of the ocean that shaped it, an ocean that still waits, sustaining one of evolution's most extraordinary journeys.